It's Case Keefer back here with Ray Brewer for Prep Sports Now, heading into week 5. We're starting to get a better lay of the land in the local high school football scene. Some national games still on the schedule, but we're wrapping up, getting more into in-state play. But these national games have been quite fun against out-of-state opponents, and kind of the winner of them early, we got to give it up to Arbor View, who's now beaten 2 teams. They prevail in the Polynesian Classic, I believe, last week against Mountain Point of Arizona, only a couple weeks removed from winning at Utah. Brewer, I feel like we usually kick off the podcast talking about Liberty or Gorman and their big national games, but it's time to give the Aggies some love because they look like they have one of their better teams this year.
Yeah, I was super impressed with how they played in the Polynesian Classic. Props to them. Not only did they win, they won pretty convincingly. And I think what was even more impressive for me is they were supposed to travel into California 2 weeks ago. The game got canceled because the event wasn't certified through the National Association, and they went out searching throughout the whole nation for a game. They had Santa Margarita briefly agreed to come in to play them, which would have been huge. Santa Margarita's like top 50, and Santa Margarita backed out. So I think what you're seeing from Arbor View is they're like, okay, we've seen what Gorman and Liberty have done. We have a lot of similarities with them, right? We've got a lot of kids in the program. We're sending kids off to major Division I schools. We've got a great following of fans. We are kind of the predominant Northeast school to go to, right? It's not Palo, it's not Centennial, it's Arbor View. So they've kind of got the market cornered on a certain demographic of kid. And now they're like, okay, let's take it to the next level, right? Their offense is evolving. They're playing the best because they know they got to beat Gorman and Liberty to get to their ultimate goal.
Yeah, so very impressive by them. Um, I think really nestled into that number 3 spot. I think we believed that coming into the year, but now it might be even clear. And perhaps you could even make a case that they belong to be number 2 because Liberty's struggles continue. They played another out-of-state opponent this week, got blown out against. I'm going to pull a Brewer here and say I can't pronounce it, but the 45-8 loss to a school from Texas. Gorman kept rolling, 45-0 win over Hamilton, which is crazy to see. I remember when I first started here, there were some classic Gorman Hamilton games, but clearly Gorman's on another level right now. We've seen this from Liberty before, where they lose a lot of the out-of-state games and end up being just fine. To me, I would kind of guess this is another case of that, but what's your level of concern for the Patriots right now?
So, a few quick things on Liberty. First of all, if you want to play college football, I think the 3 weeks that Liberty has done is kind of going to get you ready, right? Because 3 weeks ago, they took a bus to Utah. They played a very good Utah team, ton of people at the game, and the game was back and forth. And at the end, they went for 2 and didn't get it. The week after that, they're in San Diego, Labor Day weekend, for an event, and they just didn't play that good. They lost like 31-2. Offense couldn't get anything going. And then they come back and they get on a plane and they travel to Texas to play another top 50 team. And Coach Morocco, who everybody loves, was very blunt and said, "Hey, we just didn't play good. This was our worst game." And I know that they've got the blueprint from 2019, right? They went 0-5. They made the switch at quarterback. Next thing you know, they're beating Gorman and winning state. So he appreciates playing quality opponents and learning about his team in August and early September, so he doesn't have to make those adjustments in October. So the key now for him is watching what happened and getting it fixed. If they come out, this week at home against a team from Hawaii that's traveling in and they're making the same mistakes, then you got a problem. So I think this week is very telling. You don't got to get on a plane and travel. There's no more jet lag. You're in your own building. a game that's very meaningful because we know Liberty has a ton of Polynesian kids, and let's see what happens.
Yeah, that makes sense. Everyone has a process, and this is part of Liberty's process. Like you said, it's a good preparation for the next level. Probably weren't expected to win any of these games. I just think maybe the score gives you for a loop. But as Morocco said, they didn't play well. They're still headed in the right direction. This is all part of the plan. So it sounds like no need to panic there. Quickly before we move on to other levels of high school football. Just looking over the scores, I guess shout out to another team that picked up an out-of-state win. Faith Lutheran 34-15 over Bakersfield Christian. I believe hadn't they lost to Bakersfield Christian in the past, or maybe I just have a memory of Bakersfield Christian being good. I know they're coached by one of the Carr brothers, and so not a good weekend for the Carr brothers, and Faith Lutheran contributed to that.
Yeah, so they've played Faith multiple times in the last 3 or 4 years. Vernon Fox, a Fresno State guy when he was coach, kind of set that up with the Carr brothers and kind of got that going. But shout out to Faith. They're undefeated with Mike Sanford leading the way, and they're playing good. Rylan Walter, the quarterback, has got the offense kind of moving, and they got a kicker. CK, have you seen this kicker at all?
I think you've told me about him, or maybe he was at our media day. I don't. For some reason, I do have some reference, but I don't know. I feel like you're going to give me the rundown.
Well, he's a junior, first of all, so he's got plenty of time to go, but he kicked a 59-yarder. They needed him last night on Monday Night Football, CK.
Oh, yeah. Hey,
Right.
He made a 59-yarder in a high school game.
59-yard field goal in a high school game.
Man, that's insane.
Yeah, and just a junior. And so I would say a great win by Faith. They were down a little bit. They got back-to-back pick sixes 43 seconds apart. Tico Pringle, who we seem to mention every week in our game story, had one of the pick sixes. And the kicker's name is Caden Chittington, Chittenden. And it was a 56-yarder. My fault.
Yeah, well, still, I think probably a guy to watch that you're probably going to be watching on Saturdays here shortly, if you have that kind of range, right?
It would have been good case from 59, but it was only 56.
Gotcha. So not quite the 64 the Broncos settled for last night, but close enough. That's very impressive. Faith Lutheran, I know maybe we're a little disappointing last year, maybe thought more of, and I think maybe our expectations were muted coming into this year, but maybe they shouldn't have been because Faith is really on the upswing. So congrats to them. Let's touch on a couple games from other levels. And I'll take a victory lap on some of these. I didn't do the podcast with you last week, but I'm sure we would have argued about these. How about Thursday night? My Coronado Cougars knocking off the Big 5A Green Valley Gators. I was happy to see Coronado, who I've been a fan of these last couple of years, come through with what I have to think is an upset victory. I think if I was on the podcast last week, we would have had a $5 wager on this one. I
would have picked Coronado over Green Valley.
You might have listening to you, how confident you probably were about Green Valley. You might have convinced me, but I bet I would have coaxed you into a bet. I bet I would have taken Coronado plus 10 or plus 14 or something. Can't you see that scenario happening in your mind?
Yeah, I could have. I mean,
I was on Coronado.
I was shocked. So I was at this game for a quarter and a half, give or take. And shout out to the Coronado defense because they really made the Green Valley offensive line look awful. At one point, the guy was standing next to, and I won't say who, nor will I say the kid that he mentioned, but he was like, "Hey, did you see number so-and-so? He hasn't touched anybody today on the Coronado team." And that says a lot because he's an offensive lineman. And I thought that was funny. But the Martinez kid for Coronado, he's like 6'6", 200 defensive end. He was in the backfield all night. And at one point, I felt bad for the Green Valley quarterback. He was getting destroyed. Like it was a hazard type of thing. You know what I'm saying? Like his parents need to sign a special waiver for him to play in the game. He got hit so much. And unfortunately for Green Valley, it doesn't get easier this week because they've got Arbor View coming into town, the Matt Gerber reunion tour back in Green Valley.
That should be a good one. Yeah, so shout out to Coronado. And then the one other game I definitely wanted to touch on before we got to the picks. I told you I was high on Slam Academy too, and I said don't count them out. But I said there's no way Mawapa still shouldn't be the favorite. I remember saying that the last time I was on the podcast, and you were all in on Slam. I don't know if you ended up picking them, but it looks like Mawapa Valley, despite you telling me they're too young, they're might not be there this year. Seems like a statement in beating Slam 29-13 in the 3A.
Yeah, the 3A is darn interesting. You saw Boulder City 2 weeks ago take Mawapa into the fourth quarter, and then Virgin had a huge game in Pahrump. Of course, tough to get to Pahrump. The bus was an hour and a half late. The game didn't get going until 8:30. But Pahrump, from what we hear, is very physical. So it's going to be a real fun league because Sam's athletic, Mawapa's well organized, and Landon Wazinski is the man. Virgin, I told you I love their quarterback. Boulder's put up some good fights. They got some great performances Adam Moore in the backfield. And Pahrump is Pahrump. It's tough to win there, especially with how physical they are. But you were right, CK. Mawapa came in and made a statement that, hey, we're the team to beat.
Yeah, always tough year by year. I don't care who's on the roster and how much turnover there is. The title, as long as it's set up this way in the 3A, to me, especially in the South, it goes through Mawapa.
I totally agree with you, my friend.
I
I don't want to play them in October, especially in Overton.
Absolutely. Any other things I missed before we get on to this week?
Uh, that's all I got, CK. But shout out to everybody who's reached out on game night to give us stats and information. It's much appreciated. The last one is: did you see the Shadow Ridge Palo score?
I did not. Let me check. Or you just give me the rundown.
Well, so Palo obviously is not having a good year. We've documented that.
Yeah.
But Shadow hadn't beat them in 18 years.
Oh, now I see the score. And they didn't just beat them. They took out 18 years of frustration, it looks like.
Yeah, and they were fired up, bro. I've never seen a team that happy to win a non-league game against another classification. So very cool.
Yeah, that's crazy. 42-6 Shadow Ridge. I'm not gonna lie, I don't think I, 5 or 6 years ago ever thought I'd see the day where that's the score in the Shadow Ridge Palo Verde game. So wow, that's crazy.
I totally agree. And I love to see games that are meaningful, or like, do you remember Hunkies last year at Canyon and they went into Liberty and they beat Liberty?
I was at that game.
And oh, you covered that game?
Yeah.
What a wild game. And Hunky's phone was ringing all night with former players. That's what I love, when former players reach out and they're like, holy cow, you guys just did it, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, that I think it ended like Liberty hadn't lost an in-state regular season game in like 5 years or something when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And they fumbled like 8 times or something ridiculous. I mean, they were moving the ball up and down the field, but it's one of those crazy things that can only happen in football. So which sometimes bounces a weird way, and sometimes there's strange things that are happening, because I just remember Liberty was clearly the better team, but sometimes all it takes is getting a few breaks and capitalizing on them, and having that will, and Canyon had it that night, however many years ago.
It was flukish, if you will.
Yeah, I don't want to use I didn't want to use those words, but I mean, yeah, because it still takes, you still have to finish off your opportunities, and you still have to have the right mindset. But you got to be opportunistic, and when they arise, you got to pounce on them. So all credit to Canyon Springs, not taking anything away. I just meant more, it was the ultimate underdog story, because even if you were watching the game, you would think Liberty was the better team and just didn't have it that night, and Canyon Springs did what they needed to do to get the win.
Exactly.
All right, you want to start going through your picks?
Absolutely, my friend.
All right. This one's pretty good to start off. I see here at the top, Desert Oasis at Sierra Vista.
Yeah, so it's rivalry week, if you will. You've got the cleat game between the best high school in Nevada against El Dorado. You've got Vegas and Rancho in the bone game. And you've got this kind of under the radar new school rivalry between teams in the Southwest near Southern Highlands, Desert Oasis and Sierra Vista. It's a game that I really don't have a good feel on, but I think Sierra Vista, judging by its results, is slightly further down the road than Desert Oasis, and that's why I'm taking the Mountain Lions.
I feel like you're never on Desert Oasis. I feel like you don't get, the Diamondbacks don't get any respect from you. They're the new Palo Verde. I got Desert Oasis here.
New Palo Verde. Palo Verde's only won one game this
The
year.
new Palo Verde. So I mean, in years past, I feel like when Palo Verde, when they were competitive, you just wouldn't pick them because they're Palo Verde.
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Yeah, gotcha.
I don't expect you to pick them this year when they're getting blown out every week. I know they've fallen on tough times, but yeah, I'm going with Desert Oasis. I know where you're going this week. Continuing with that rivalry theme, the cleat game, Shap is going to El Dorado.
Yeah, two teams, CK. Let's be honest, they're not going far. My Cowboys have won one game this year. El Dorado's also only won one game, but it was against one of the new charter schools. Eldo didn't play last week. Shap got buried by Basic at home. Shap's just not that good. They could be. I don't think they've lost this cleat in 7 or 8 years, but they got to be on high alert. El Dorado might have to find a place for that thing, but I'll go with my heart, CK, and I'll take the Cowboys. I don't mind losing this week.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like it's been so many years since L Dog won in this series, so I kind of hope they win just because it's been so long. It looks like it could be a fair fight. So I'll go the other way. I'll go with El Dorado. For me, looking at the scores and what's happened this year, I think it's about a coin flip. Not even doing it to antagonize you. I promise. I just these rivalry games, I like there to be a little more parity, and maybe this is a year where El Dorado can strike back a little bit.
Yeah, and the good news is that because both teams aren't going far, the Super Bowl esque feeling of tonight or of Friday night, where there's going to be a trophy given out, does enhance the importance. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. So we're on different sides on that one. I don't think we're going to be on different sides of this one. The Bone Game. This is Las Vegas's for way more than 7 years. I got to think it's closer to like 27 or 37 years or something. But I think they keep it again against Rancho.
Yeah, as they say at Vegas, the bone stays home. I've got the Wildcats. Interesting note, this is the first time the game's been played since 2019. Obviously, the 20 season was canceled because of the pandemic. And then the 21 game was also canceled because of positive COVID testing in one of the programs. So there's one player, a kid named Brian Rodriguez, a linebacker for Rancho, who's ever played in the bone game, suiting up on Friday night. So glad to get this rivalry going because it expects to be a standing room only crowd.
Yeah, one of the most storied ones, and that's cool. That's crazy. I didn't realize they hadn't played in that long, but we've both got Las Vegas, Arbor View at Green Valley. Not necessarily a rivalry, but as you said earlier, the Matt Gerber Bowl.
Yeah, the Matt Gerber Bowl. Listen, my two takeaways from last week were one, Arbor View is, like I proclaimed earlier, has one of its best teams ever. And of course, they've been around since like '05. And then I was just shocked of how Green Valley's offensive line was brutal. And that's a bad combo because we know, Christian Thatcher and the boys at Arbor like to put some pressure on the other team. So it's a real bad combo this week for the Gators.
Yeah, it's bad if Brewer's commenting on the offensive line. Is it you? You would never comment on the lines back in the day.
It was like they weren't even there. I mean, and I love Coach Clay Morrow. He's a great guy. I've really enjoyed getting to know him. And I mean, you just got to pop the tape in, and I mean, it was brutal. I mean, I was a brutal performance by one half of the just brutal. And it was on TV, so the whole valley saw it.
Yeah. All right. Well, our review is going to win that one. How about Canyon Springs at Faith Lutheran?
Yeah, Faith, shout out to Mike Sanford. I'm looking at their schedule. They got a chance to be an 11-1 team this year, with the one obviously being the playoff loss to Gorman.
They could go.
Actually, on my bad, they play Liberty. That was a bad comment.
Okay,
But
I was about to say, I
yeah,
was surprised they could miss all those teams.
yeah, but they're good.
Yeah.
I don't want to take anything away from what Coach Sanford's doing. I mean, the guy was a college coach. It was only a matter of time until he got this program winning some games, and they're improved. Shout out to them. Coach of the year, possibly.
All right, we're both on Faith Lutheran. Palo Verde at Centennial. I was going to say this used to be a really interesting game, but I feel like it's a really interesting game this year again. These got to be the bottom two teams, arguably at the top level, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you're reading the picks, CK, but I've been wrong on Centennial 3 out of 4 times this year. They account for literally 38% of my losses in the picks. I was very wrong on them. And I don't regret it necessarily, but it is what it is. But I do think they're ahead of Palo at this stage of the game.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll follow you with Centennial, but I mean, both teams. It's been a rough year, but I think they should have a little push this week. 'Cause they both got to think they got a chance at a win this week, right? There's not. It's hard to say one team's really separated themselves from the other. So hopefully, they're both keeping their heads up over there, and I think this could quietly be a really good game.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, how about Brookwood from Georgia coming out to take on Bishop Gorman? I'm not familiar with Brookwood of Georgia, but I got to think they're an awfully good school to be coming out here and being on ESPNU.
Yeah, it's I know at the beginning of the year, Gorman thought this was kind of like their second stiffest opponent outside of modern day. And you get the bright lights of ESPNU. You're ready to go. I don't think the heat is going to be a factor because of the humidity in Georgia. So the travel here could be a factor, but I don't necessarily think the heat will be a factor. But I do think Gorman is significantly better than Brookwood, who is 1-2 to start the season and has only scored 61 points in 3 games. I don't see them keeping up with Gorman's offense to win this game.
Yeah, I think maybe it's closer than 49-7, but makes sense. Also, quick aside, I don't know why this reminded me of that, but going into the season, I wrote a thing that you can find on LasVegasSun.com, a roundup of 15 of the best local high school players in college this year. Obviously, there's a ton, but I tried to just keep it to the top 15. And I got to say, I, of course, conferred with you before and we came up with a lot of names, but we really struck out and missed one. Do you know who I'm talking about? A former Gorman kid?
Donovan Smith.
No, I actually ended up mentioning him just since he wasn't the starter. He didn't make it, but I mentioned him that the center could be snapping to him. And man, that was a wild ride with him last week. By the way, now we're really getting off on
that
tangents.
game.
Yeah, I watched a lot of that game. He was awesome in the first half, kind of lost it in the second half, and then they had to win it in overtime. He was all over the place, but he's fun to watch and playing well as well. But who I'm talking about is Cedric Tillman.
I know, with Tennessee. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure no one really cares or is holding a grudge against us, but I wanted to at least give him a shout out on the podcast because we missed him in the roundup, but he's awfully good.
And they won in overtime, right, CK?
Yeah, against Pitt.
And I think he had the winning touchdown.
Yeah, I think he did, or he at least had a touchdown at some point. If it wasn't the winning one, it's so many games. I'm my short term memory is going. I can't even remember, but I know he had a big game and scored at least once.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There was another player who did something, and I was like, oh boy, we missed him. But I'm not quite sure who it is now. So
yeah, there's just so many. It's crazy. It's a testament to how good high school football has been. I just remember when we first did this. I mean, honestly, I feel like there'd only be 5 or 6 guys at that level that we'd be, having to look out for every week. But this week you're watching games and oh, I remember that guy. It come quite a long way. It feels like to me, right?
absolutely, yeah, it's been very impressive to say the least.
All right. Well, Liberty is also a team that has a lot of those kids. I know we were texting when Jeremy Bernard scored the first touchdown of the year for Michigan State, and I'm sure they have a lot of D1 kids on the team this year. And now they're having maybe their final out-of-state opponent, at least second to last. They are at home this week, but they're taking on Kamehameha, maybe from Hawaii. I'm sure I butchered that, but Liberty, Kamehameha, who you got?
I've got Liberty. I think that this is not one of Hawaii's premier teams. Factor in the travel. I think Liberty needs to get right, and I think this is a victory for the Patriots.
Is this like a part two of the Polynesian Classic?
Yeah, I don't know why they're doing it on separate days, but it is what it is, right?
Right. All right. So Liberty gets an out of state win. They break their kind of skid. I'm with you, and we'll go with the Patriots. Back to local opponents, Durango at Legacy. What could be a good game?
Yeah, so Legacy finally got right and got a win last week against Centennial. Really slung it around well, had a good week of practice, jumped on them early. The game was they were up 3 touchdowns before I got my first message of the score. So shout out to them. Durango is 3-1 for a reason. They're playing well. I'm going not probably a good rule of thumb, but 3A versus 4A. I mean 4A versus 5A. So give me the Longhorns.
Yeah, that makes sense. Looks like it might be another 4A over 5A here. Shadow Ridge at Foothill. Foothill's falling on tough times. I've got the Mustangs.
I've got the Mustangs too, and obviously we're part of that One Hill family. Now that my kids are going to school in that area, and I love their game night. What they do on game night, they get a ton of people there, and I really think that makes a difference. And Shadow Ridge is coming from the complete opposite end of town. And I really do think that Foothill has a few more Jimmies and Joes than Shadow, but Foothill ain't going to stop that running attack. And Shadow's going to win the game. It's like when you play Air Force, you're kind of practicing it all year on how to beat the triple option. And that's kind of where playing Shadow Ridge has to be. And I don't see it happening. So, victory for the Mustangs.
Yeah, I agree with you. Shadow Ridge there. Bonanza at Del Sol.
Two teams looking for their first win. Probably play this one 10 times, and each team would win 5. I got the Dragons by default.
I'll go with Bonanza by default. So we'll be on opposite sides of that one. Another close-ish game, Cheyenne at Mojave. I got to think Mojave's a little bit ahead of Cheyenne right now.
I do too, but Mojave didn't look great last week against Vegas. Vegas got after them pretty good. Of course, it's Vegas case, and that's one of the premier programs. But I do think Mojave is further down the road than Cheyenne, and Mojave's got a ton of basketball players from their state championship basketball team playing football, and I think that athleticism is tough to match.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Silverado, aka the 4A Gorman at this point, going to Coronado, maybe the toughest game on their regular season schedule. But I kind of feel like the Cougars are going to be humbled after their big win against the Gators. You look at Silverado scores and it's hard to pick against them.
Yeah, I made in my topper last week in the Silverado gamer. I said Donovan Pellet might be the best player in state. And a lot of people were like, oh, they're playing nobody. He's got no competition, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, the guy did this against two 5A schools. He hasn't played Gorman and he hasn't played Liberty, right? But numbers aside, you got a hard time not picking this kid as the Gatorade Player of the Year, right?
Yeah, he's got an argument, it seems like.
My God, his stats are, again, he could be playing the Little Sisters of the Poor, but, there's a reason why this kid's got a ton of offers and he's going to be able to kind of handpick where he's going to go to school now. I mean, the numbers are just gaudy. This is 2 years of every time he touches the ball, he scores a touchdown.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's never tackled. I mean, he hasn't been tackled in 2 years, Case. Think about that. I mean, it's an exaggeration, but he basically is a threat to score every time he touches the ball, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, no, I had no argument here. It makes sense. He's been unbelievable. I think he'll have a chance to do it again this week. So we will both be on Silverado. Spring Valley at Basic. Is this kind of offense versus defense? I know Spring Valley, you always talk about their defense, and Basic, it's more offense.
Yeah, this is a sneaky darn good game of the week, in my opinion. Two teams threatening to be in the conversation of the 4A, right? I think you would say Silverado's in a class of its own, and then underneath Silverado, you've got Coronado and Shadow, right?
Uh-huh.
And then kind of right underneath them, you've got Basic and Spring. Even though arguably we might pick Basic or Spring against Coronado, arguably, CK.
Yeah.
Coronado, of course, getting no love despite what they did to Green Valley last week. But this is going to be a darn good game because Spring Valley is 3-1 for the first time since 2008, and Basic is undefeated, and they've outscored opponents like 180-8. Now, granted, they played Little Sisters of the Poor and my Shap Cowboys, but they did travel to Carson and had a good win. I don't care who the opponent is. It's tough going up north. We've established that the last 10 years talking on this show. This is a darn good game. I've got the Wolves because I love what they do at home at Don Taylor Stadium. But interested to see your take, my friend.
Yeah, I think I'm a big home field guy, and I agree with you. It's pretty close, and I feel like I've picked Spring Valley every time I've been on the podcast this week, but I just can't quite, or this year, excuse me, I just can't quite get there this year. I'm gonna have to go with Basic as well. Um, so we're both on Basic. Sunrise Mountain at Clark. We already know Sunrise Mountain is back up and rolling. Clark, slight step back from last year so far. I've got Sunrise.
I do too, but who knows? That Sunrise didn't look good last week in Utah, but I have Sunrise again.
All right. Moapa Valley at Pahrump Valley. Hey, it looks like you're on the Pahrump train. You're talking them up and saying they have some advantages, maybe in the trenches, maybe in what they do. So
I mean, I think we're one step away from a road team spending the night at the Pahrump Nugget on Thursday night and then playing on Friday. Because 2 weeks ago, the Virgin bus got stuck going from Mesquite to Pahrump, was an hour and a half late, had to get off the bus, and was in a dogfight until they won. Now, that doesn't take anything away from what I'm told Pahrump is a very physical team. Last week, Rancho leaves the school parking lot, is at the light in front of the school, and a car rams into the bus. They got to wait for another bus to come, get them to Pahrump. They left at 4. They didn't get to Pahrump until 8:30. And then they end up losing like 35-5 or something, or 7, or whatever it was. Pahrump was going to beat Rancho either way, but you just can't say Moapa is better than Pahrump because Moapa has to win the travel before they, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I hate to say this, Pahrump is like, 70 minutes away from our office. But when you're coming from Overton, which is basically Utah, it's like a two-hour drive, mixing traffic and all that stuff. That's a big difference, man. I still think Moapa wins, but if Pahrump would win, it wouldn't be a cardinal sin. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's see if they get there safely first. I think they will, though, and hopefully no one runs into the bus.
And I don't even know if you could stay at the Pahrump Nugget, by the way. I don't even know if the Pahrump Nugget has rooms.
Yeah, well, it's a good shout out anyway. We're both going to go with Moapa, but not as confident as we might be in the past. And maybe that's the same thing for this game. Virgin Valley at Boulder City. Boulder City's also on the way up. I think Virgin Valley can still go there and win, but it's another tough road trip.
Yeah, Boulder City showed how good they were against Milwaukee, but I'm not backing off the Bulldogs. Love their quarterback.
Yeah, so we're both on Virgin Valley, and then Slam Academy at Valley. Slam finally gets a setback last week against Moapa, but I think they're bouncing back here against Valley.
Yeah, Valley is in a building phase and not winning this game.
All right, well, that does it for the 3A and all of the picks. For Ray, I'm Case. Thanks a lot for listening to Prep Sports Now. Please get with Ray to get your scores in on Friday, and we'll be back to talk more high school football next week. Thanks for listening.